You had President Adams and his son, President Adams. You had the Roosevelts, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You had the Kennedys, and then they had muscle because Joe Kennedy Sr. was a gangster. He was a bootlegger, and he used
That's
to.
how they established Hollywood, by the way. It was a bunch of gang members that established Hollywood. The bootleggers went in there, attorneys.
Yeah, I'll tell you some stuff off the record about that.
Wait a second, y'all. This conversation between Candace Owens and Judge Joe Brown is on fire. They're about to spill the tea on how Hollywood isn't what it seems. Judge Joe Brown just revealed that Hollywood was basically built by gangsters and bootleggers. Yeah, you heard that right. And when Candace Owens jumps in, she's not holding back either. She's connecting the dots between Hollywood, political dynasties, and even the Clintons. You already know when Candace Owens and Judge Joe Brown get into it, things are about to explode. Stick around, because this deep dive into Hollywood's dark side is just getting started.
So it's like you get this whole thing, and then you get the Bushes in here, and then you have the Clintons who are newbies into this whole thing, and now you have some other stuff that's going on, these peripherals.
Well, it's funny you say that the Clintons are newbies, though, because even like Bill Clinton has like a weird story. Like his dad was killed in a car accident when he was like 2. It's like once you start looking into their genealogy, they all kind of have like these weird tragic stories, and then they're just kind of become the president. And I'm like, okay, well, I've lived around a lot of people who have like don't have a dad. Like they don't really go on to like go to Harvard and Yale and become president. So it's like it just makes you wonder like what is actually happening here.
And then you find something else. Look at Barack Obama. What kind of connection does Barack Obama or Barry Soetoro have with the United States? He's got a long history through his mother's side of the family. They were slave owners, and 2 of his ancestors were Confederate officers during the Civil War. One even rode with Cantrell, the guerrilla up in Kansas and Missouri. He's got a connection. But even if you get away from whether or not Kamala is black, what connection does she have with the United States? Probably the least out of any candidate for president in this country's history. So you have a situation where her parents have academic visas. They're transitory. They have no intention of being permanent residents or citizens. It's passing through. She lies a lot about it, but you've seen that, when she got to Canada, how old she was, and that's her background.
Graduated from high school, wealthy, Canadian.
The whole 9 yards. And she doesn't have that American vibe where you from elementary school are taught about what this country's supposed to be about. You have this thing where it's part of the Commonwealth, so they're subjects. Now, you probably have talked to your husband about that and your father-in-law, the Earl, and they view this whole thing about being subjects in a different way than we here in the States view about being a citizen.
It's very different. Across the pond is very different.
Very different. But that's the background with Kamala, the way she was brought up. And you get the feeling that somebody is trying to become part of something, but they don't want anybody with any real connection. The more isolated they are, the more they're subject to convenient control.
Now that Candace Owens and Judge Joe Brown have blown the lid off how Hollywood got its gangster roots, what do you think? Is this the Hollywood you imagined, or is it even shadier than you thought? Let's keep the conversation going. Visit us in our Discord. Link is in the description and pinned comment. You definitely want to join the discussion with the community on this one.
Today is tomorrow, which is why yesterday is tomorrow too, which is why we all, that word salad nonsense, which is you got a silly somebody that's lazy, the brightest bulb on the shelf, and is easily manipulated because somebody has done what in Hollywood they call the casting couch routine to get where they are. But at some point, if you get to the top with the casting couch, the problem is that there's nobody to sleep with after a certain point. You have to have the raw talent, and if you don't have the talent, then you're not going to do anything much, and that's what our problem is. It's who is behind her in who is controlling her.
Yeah, that's what concerns me is that she comes across to me like an empty vessel. And it was interesting to read. I'm not saying obviously that everything this journalist wrote was real, but I do take his points about her mother being a government agent quite seriously because of just, he says, even in her demeanor, because then when I spoke to Kamala's family members, they said, far from this depiction that she has of this, warm, fluffy upbringing, that actually her mother was quite militant with her.
That's a wrap on this wild conversation between Candace Owens and Judge Joe Brown, where they pulled back the curtain on Hollywood's gangster origins. Did you know that Hollywood's foundation was built during the Prohibition era, when gangsters and bootleggers like Joe Kennedy Sr. funneled money into film studios? Prohibition, intended to eliminate alcohol, actually empowered criminal enterprises, creating a booming black market for illegal booze. These bootleggers, flush with cash, turned their attention to legitimate industries, Hollywood being a prime target. Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. even invested in iconic films like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, blending Hollywood glamour with gangster money. But it didn't stop there. The influence of organized crime in Hollywood extended well beyond film production, shaping the industry's power dynamics and glamorizing gangster lifestyles. And don't even get us started on the notorious casting couch phenomenon, another dark chapter in Hollywood's history. As Judge Joe Brown pointed out, back in the day, advancing in Hollywood often came at a heavy price, a reality tied to those early shady connections. Kamala Harris might just be the last of a dying breed. These days, the casting calls aren't just about talent. They're about paying allegiance to corporate politics. Look at what happened with Joker 2. Director Todd Phillips had to clarify that the Joker franchise wasn't meant to glamorize violence, but to expose its brutal reality. The sequel wasn't even about toxic fandom, just trauma and societal neglect. But that's where we're at. Wokeness, corporate allegiance, and narratives that serve the establishment. Hollywood sure has come a long way from its gangster origins, but as Candace Owens and Judge Joe Brown showed us today, the shadow of its past still looms large. So what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are today's casting calls just corporate politics, or is Hollywood still hiding more secrets? For the real after-show carnage, be sure to visit us in our Discord. Links in the description and pinned comment. And if you want to help the channel grow, the best way to do that is to stay right here. Click that next recommended video and keep the conversation going. Stay tuned. There's always more to uncover.